Hi, welcome to Elevating Impact. This is Molly Harper with the Harper Consulting Group, and this is a series of conversations highlighting phenomenal leaders and nonprofits across the country. I'm excited to welcome Curt Yagi of Real Options for City Kids based in San Francisco. Curt, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I would love to just start with hearing a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, so Real Options for City Kids, that's the nonprofit name. R.O.C.K is the acronym, which we think is pretty cool. So we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary. So we've been around for 30 years. We serve this small pocket in San Francisco called Visitation Valley. It's got a lot of challenges. Over 85% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. Lots of stuff going on there, but there's tons of families and it's just a great community. And so what we do, our specialty is really, we've always been good at social emotional learning, using recreation, outdoor adventures, different enrichments as the tool. We've always known from the very beginning that you can only do that so many days a week, so many hours a day. The We needed to go to where the kids are, and that's the schools. And so in our community, there's two elementary schools, one middle school. We're the lead nonprofit partner for all three schools. And so what that means is we work directly with our principals, we analyze data, we just know the landscape very well. We look for gaps in programmings, we understand what our kids need. And if there's things that make sense for us to fill, like more enrichment, more rec, even some more academic stuff, we add more resources. And if there's not, then we find partners to fill those gaps.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, so how long have you been involved with the organization? How did you come to be with R.O.C.K?
Yeah, so my story is interesting, and I mean maybe there's other executive directors are just like me, but I actually graduated college with a computer science degree, and then I went into technology consulting, kind of in the corporate sector. I was sort of the oddball of the family because my parents were both teachers, my sister was occupational therapist, I had a couple nurses in the family, and so I always had this bug to do more. And so after doing corporate work for a while, I was looking for opportunities, and rock just kind of popped up on my radar. I was on an adult soccer league, and one of my teammates said you should volunteer for this program called rock. That was 1998. So many years ago, I got sucked in, as you can tell. And so just went from volunteering to running our Saturday program. I was on the board of directors, and really it came to a point where 5 years later, just the opportunity came up to transition to the executive director, and I made the leap. That was 21 years ago.
How was the transition from the private sector into the nonprofit world?
Um, It was tough. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I mean, I think I did pretty well in my career in the corporate sector, and I just assume that I can take a lot of those best practices, best business practices, and really apply that to the nonprofit sector. And I think for a lot of what I was doing at the beginning, a lot of it did work. But then there's this whole other side, the nonprofit heart and soul, which is different from the business world. People are there for different reasons. You can't make things black and white. And so I still, I think I'm trying to learn how to be better at this every day. But I feel like I'm in a position now where I've found the middle ground, where you could still have those processes, but then you can be a good listener, be empathetic, and really get to roots of the problem and put people where they're best utilized. And I think we have a really good system now uh, where it's sort of the best of both worlds.
That's fabulous. That's great. Um, uh, Thinking a little bit more about who you're serving and kind of the scope of your organization, maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about the Valley and who you're serving.
Yeah, so Visitation Valley, it's sort of in the southeast sector of San Francisco. We've got, I believe it's still five housing developments there. So a lot of our kids come from public housing. And so it's it's not a childhood I experienced when I was growing up. I grew up in the suburbs, not too far away. And I remember the times when, as a kid, I would be able to run around all day. My parents just knew I was going to go on my bike or whatever, and it was fine. And maybe that's just a function of the day and age we're in. I don't know if you could ever do that in Viz Valley back then,
Mhm.
and certainly not today. And so it's really our kids just don't have those opportunities to do different things and to be kids a lot of times. And so it's tough for them to grow up in that kind of environment where there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of different things. It's hard when you don't have a lot of resources. And so that's really what we do. I mean, one of our biggest assets is just, we broaden the horizons of our kids. And so a lot of times that's with new activities, it's with caring adults who are representative of them, new ideas for different things. And it's just a lot of exposure to different things that they would normally not have access to. And so that's sort of the community that we're serving and sort of what we try to do for them.
Fabulous. Well, one of the things that we're going to be talking about in this podcast kind of throughout is the partnership model,
Sure.
in terms of how nonprofits are partnering with other organizations. And clearly, you have an amazing partnership with public schools
That's
in
right.
the area. I was actually wondering if you could tell us a little bit about like the funding for the public school landscape, or and how that is impacting them and your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think fortunately, San Francisco is a great place for nonprofits for a lot of reasons. I mean,
Mhm.
there's ups and downs, but in terms of the funding side of things in California in general, the city of San Francisco does a great job. They have a fund reserved for children and family,
Mm.
Department of Children, Youth, and Families. So that's pretty stable money. And I think it's probably stable for the next 20 plus years. It's been around for a while. So that's been great. San Francisco Unified, through the state of California and some federal resources, has funding for, I mean, they have pockets for after school programs. They have a whole new state of California has this whole community schools initiative, which is intended for the stuff that we do, the non-academic stuff, all the social emotional stuff and basic needs and all that kind of stuff. So there's a great pool of resources available to us. And so that for us, that represents maybe 70% of our budget. And so the remaining part of our budget, we have to fundraise for. But at least it's such a solid baseline where we can build upon it and really have a lot of impact for our students and their families as well.
That's that's wonderful, and it's really nice to have some stability in your public funding. I know a lot of
Right.
organizations are wondering what their public funding is going to look like. So
Yeah, you never
that's
know.
great. That's great. Well, in looking ahead, since it is around the new year, what do you think are your biggest challenges that you're facing, aside from the challenges, obviously, that your community is facing, your organization?
Yeah,
What are you
no,
facing?
totally. I mean, one of our biggest values that we provide is we have a very low adult to child ratio. And when you're working with kids that have experienced a lot of negativity, and different, just a different upbringing than I'm used to, you need a lot of adults, a lot of caring adults that are representative of them. As you can imagine, San Francisco is extremely expensive to live in, and so one of our biggest challenges is staffing, just hiring and retaining staff. And I mean, the biggest thing we've done I mean, I guess since the start of the pandemic, is really increase our salaries, our benefits, our professional development, everything. Just having this culture that we're trying to maximize just the desire for people to work for us and stay with us. And we've seen some great results. Having said that, when we're dealing with the type of programs we're dealing with, the majority of our staff are, college age students in college, a lot of transitional age. San Francisco is a transitional city. And so we know we've come to expect a lot of turnover, throughout the years. We're just trying to minimize that as much as possible. So it's this ongoing challenge and conversation we have about how do we just, is it really just increasing salaries or there's other things that we can do to make it more attractive to be here? So that's probably the biggest thing that we're always thinking about.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I think especially when we're talking about your organization that relies a good deal on public dollars,
Right.
typically there are not a lot of public dollars for increasing compensation
Yeah.
to kind of at least make somewhat balance compensation for nonprofits than similarly sized,
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about it, a lot of, these college age students, they could, where we live, they can go to a tech job and do a lower end tech job and maybe make more than what we're able to pay. And so it's just this constant balance of how do we do that? And so that's the importance of the fundraising side for us to be able to keep increasing those amounts.
Right. Well, the challenges seem very clear, absolutely. And I think those challenges are shared by a lot of nonprofits, especially those that work with the public school system
Yeah.
in their areas. Looking forward, saying you have the resources you need, you have the wind at your back. What's the growth? What is the big next
Mm.
step that you all want to take?
Yeah, what's funny is before the pandemic, so this was, I mean, it was really months before the pandemic, we were going through the strategic plan of, do we double down in Viz Valley or do we try to expand outward? And yeah, and so the pandemic hit during that process, and we're like, yeah, we got to double down here in Viz Valley. And in fact, I think since 2020, our budget has increased by 70%. Just the need is so great. We've been there so long that we're kind of the organization that needed to help. Um, that being said, the deeper we got into Viz Valley, the more that we realized a couple things. One is by doubling, tripling down, we're having a lot of impact, and we can see that in our data. And two, we also realize there's still a long way to go. Why stop here? So I don't know in the short, 3 to 5 years, if we're going to try to go outside of our community. I mean, maybe adjacent communities, but I think this is our pocket for now. And so what we can do, I mean, the limit we have is we only have 3 schools. It's not like we're going to have more schools. And in fact, there's challenges in San Francisco with families leaving, so we might actually have less schools at some point. Um, and so we want to make sure for the schools that we have, we're maximizing our impact there. And so keep in mind, we're only serving right now TK through 8th grade. Um, the area of opportunity is, our whole mission is we're trying to give kids tools, through safe environments, social emotional learning support, all these other things, broadening horizons so that they have the tools to navigate life when they're adults. And so there is that gap from, when they enter high school and graduate high school, um, of we could do more there. And so I think realistically, if we could see that end-to-end TK through graduation, we'll have better data. And I think we'll have better impact if we follow those kids all the way through adulthood, because that's what our mission is. We want to see healthy, successful, productive adults.
Absolutely. So um, it's fascinating to hear you talk about, your budget increase but you mentioned the impact difference that you're seeing. Could you just talk a little bit more about since
Sure.
then, like what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few areas. So what we did, um, 2020, distance learning, we helped as much as we could during that. We knew the time for return to in-person learning was coming. We conducted all this research. We talked to parents, we talked to the schools, our students, families. We're trying to figure out, okay, when students return to in-person learning, we know that there's going to be challenges, but how do we really identify those challenges correctly and respond with different solutions? And so I think, it was all across the board. It was basic needs, it was medical support, it was academics, it was just social emotional learning, kids learning how to play with each other, because at some of the ages, they never develop that school and they rust back into school. And so, I mean, right away, we found partners to take care of all the stuff that was outside of our lane. So a lot of our kids could not see well. They hadn't been to the eye doctor. We set up a couple vision days on site,
Wow.
found a bunch of optometrists who volunteered their time. I mean, we had over 100, well over 100 kids that needed glasses. They got seen on site, free prescription glasses made there. That's just one example. I mean, there was all financial support for families that we leaned into, food insecurity. We held food, distributed foods to families, sometimes deliver it to their door. But I think more relevant for R.O.C.K, a few areas. One, we always did some sort of light literacy support. It's not our strong area, but we always did some element of that because it was important. We leaned into that a little bit more. So we had more staff that were trained to do that during the school day. Um, sort of, we always had staff on during lunchtime and recess periods because that's been our model. We usually had two staff there just to help. Teachers don't want to be out in the yard helping kids. So we would take on that responsibility. We tripled that effort in a lot of cases. So we had a ton of staff on the yard that were trained in social emotional and restorative practices. Because our kids, there were so many incidents, especially at the middle school. There was a lot of fights. When we did that at the middle school, there was no fights that first year. And then the elementary school, we reduced behavior incidents by, I think it was 70, 80% to a lot lower than that. So that worked really well. The one area that we really developed and we still have today is just general wellness support because it's sort of in our DNA of social emotional learning and how to communicate with kids and how to have them communicate to you to talk to you about their feelings and just what they're going through. And so those are the three elements that we really just leaned heavier into. And so we're still doing a lot of that today. It's not cheap because we have a lot of people on staff. We have 49 people on staff across, mostly across the three sites. Very expensive, so we had to do extra fundraising, but we made it happen. And it's still really all that extra stuff is still part of what we're doing right now.
That's wonderful. Well, they are clearly lucky to have you. And I think San Francisco was lucky to have the organization as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you so much for this. For those of us who are watching this, what can we do to help? What do you need?
Yeah, well, of course, financial support is always needed because it is really expensive, especially with the cost of living in San Francisco. But we're always looking for volunteers. We have opportunities for corporations to come for a one-time activity. I know a lot of corporations like to do that. So they can come maybe do a carnival with us or something like that. We have opportunities for individuals to do, short-term activities, maybe our Saturday sports clinics, come and help with that for 6 sessions. Or if, volunteers want to help in the school, helping with literacy, reading support for our kids, they can certainly do that. Those that have flexible schedules that can come once a week.
Wonderful. Well, and I assume that companies that have employee giving programs can certainly, the employees can certainly direct their giving toward you as well.
Absolutely. And then all this information, I know you're going to post this as well, but it's on our website, rocksf.org. That's ROCKSF as in San Francisco.org.
Great. Curt, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Had a lot of fun.
Okay, great. And stay tuned for the next conversations.